Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Monday edition of the PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast. I am your host for this episode, the Young Buck, Andy York. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to us. Whether this is your first time or you've been with us since the beginning, we really appreciate you tuning in and listening to us. Whether you're on the BodySlam.net YouTube channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the notifications bell so you never miss out on our videos, as well as all the other amazing shows on the BodySlam.net YouTube channel. And then while you're at it, go on over to SportsWire and listen to our show that we have going on there as well. Basically, we are played almost every day there, but you can also listen to a lot of other amazing sports podcasts on SportsWire as well. So definitely go check them out and listen to them. And then if you're listening to this on a more traditional format, we really appreciate you listening to us there. Make sure you leave that rate and review. Make sure you share it with your friends and do all of that fun stuff as well. This episode is a lot of fun. We are going to be talking about the greatest streak in pro wrestling history, in my opinion. No, we're not talking about Goldberg because that would make me turn into a ball of flames. But we are talking about the WrestleMania Undertaker streak, the greatest streak of all time. But there is no way that I could do this by myself. I am bringing in the what I am dubbing the Undertaker expert out of the two of us, the OG host of the PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast, Chris Belcher. Man, how you doing?
Man, I kind of wish we were talking about Goldberg now.
Watch him bust into flames.
No, man, I'm doing good. Resident Undertaker expert. That's fun. Yeah, man, doing great. It's how can you not be doing great when it's WrestleMania season?
Yeah,
like for real. Like we mentioned a couple of weeks back, like this is the Super Bowl of pro wrestling. And how can you not be excited? Because wrestling just ramps up around this time, and it's fantastic. It's not just WWE that ramps up. Everybody ramps up. Everybody is, shooting their best shot at this point.
Yep.
And when we talk about WrestleMania, like you said, you can't talk about Mania without talking about The Undertaker, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, WrestleMania performers of all time. That's what we're doing today.
Yeah, I completely agree. So, as the Undertaker expert of the two of us, because the first Taker Mania match that I remember, was it Shawn? I think it was the first Shawn one.
That'd be 25 in 2009.
Yeah, that would be it. So that was the first Shawn one that I remember. Obviously, the hype around that and everything else. But kind of talk about like the early days of the streak. We'll start talking about matches and stuff, but they didn't really mention the streak until WrestleMania, until he was like 10-0, I think it was.
Yeah, it was WrestleMania 19. Yeah. The end of WrestleMania 19 when he had the handicap match against the Big Show and A-Train. It's actually supposed to be a tag team match with Nathan Jones, and then Nathan Jones wasn't ready to go in the ring, so they took Nathan Jones out, just had him do a run-in at the end of the match. But at the end of that match, you see The Undertaker looking at the hard cam, and he starts counting his WrestleMania wins. And it was at that point that they actually realized, hey, wait, he's never been beaten. Like that's going to be a thing.
Yeah.
And then it really develops into a thing a couple of years later, because after WrestleMania 19, Taker takes some time off. I think it's around October or November of that year. Doesn't show back up until WrestleMania the following year against Kane. So the streak's not really a thing then. Then the next year against Randy Orton when he is doing the Legend Killer stuff. Yeah. That's when the streak really becomes a thing. The early days of The Undertaker at WrestleMania, man, you knew it was special because it was The Undertaker, and he developed being a special character really, really early on. So anytime Taker was in Mania, it was special, but it really didn't start getting special until he started winding down his full-time career, and he would only do a handful of matches of the year, and one was WrestleMania. You knew you were getting a blockbuster Taker match, and we're going to go through some of those because it's some of the greatest wrestling matches, not just Mania matches, but wrestling matches of all time.
Yeah, I think he has we'll talk about the streak within the streak, in my opinion, of stellar matches from Batista to I even consider the Brock Lesnar one because of the ending. We'll talk about all of that, but that 4-year stretch when he faced Shawn twice and then faced Triple H twice. I mean, 4 of the greatest WrestleMania matches and 4 of just the greatest matches of all time in that sector. But we'll jump into that and talk about that. So we're not going to talk about each match because there's 21 of them, and that would take a little while. But we'll jump through the first five. We'll talk about the first five kind of together because really it was the sixth match against Sid that was kind of the first big moment of the streak, which was for the title. But out of these first five, man, what match really sticks out to you the most? Because the first couple ones were not very long. I think they were like 4 minutes to 7 minutes long, something like that. And then the Diesel one, I think, was the longest one at that point, which went 13 or 16 minutes. But out of those five, which one kind of sticks out to you the most?
Obviously, the Diesel match sticks out to me the most because I'm a Kevin Nash fan. And seeing those two guys collide on a big stage like that was great for me, so that one sticks out to me. But when you look at the first couple of matches, it's really funny because Bruce Pritchard talks about all the time how Taker used to give him crap for feeding the Undertaker big guys, especially big guys that can't work. So if you look back at those opponents, King Kong Bundy, okay, he was known to go back in his day, but not in 1995.
Right.
Giant Gonzalez. I mean, dude couldn't work with Shawn Michaels and have a good match, much less work with The Undertaker and have a good match. So that was terrible. Jake the Snake, okay, that was fine. Jimmy Snuka at the very end of his career. So The Undertaker would always give creative crap for the big guys. Look at Great Khali later on and just all this nonsense. So, so the first five, it's like, it doesn't really, I'm not going to say it's not as important, but it's kind of not as important because it's forgotten about because yes, Snuka and Jake is a clean win, but Giant Gonzalez and King Kong Bundy, both of those end in countouts or DQs or something.
Yeah.
And then Diesel, then we start getting definitive wins and quality matches from then on out.
Well, not until 2001. I mean, 2001 is when he faces Triple H for the first time, and Triple H is not as big as Kane and Big Boss Man and all these other guys. So that was like the first normal size guy, I guess, that he would compete against.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Diesel one also sticks out. I also think the Giant Gonzalez one kind of sticks out for not good reasons.
Right.
Not Taker's fault at all. I mean, absolutely not Taker's fault at all. But I think it's the only one between that one and I think it was that one. That's the only one that is not a pinfall or submission finish. It's a disqualification, which was chloroform, which is strange. Strange, very strange. But I agree. I think the Diesel one does stick out because yes, Jimmy Snuka is a big name, and yes, Jake the Snake is a big name. But I think Diesel was the biggest match at that time between those first five. But then we go to sixth match, which is WrestleMania 13 against Psycho Sid. Obviously, when you think of WrestleMania 13, you don't think of this match. You think of Stone Cold and Bret Hart. But this match was for the title. Kind of his first big WrestleMania moment, I would say.
Yes.
Is WrestleMania 13. Kind of talk about the match, man. Like Psycho Sid, obviously, we're recording this, kind of pulling back the curtain. We're recording this on March 10th. As of right now, has not been declared for the Hall of Fame, but is rumored right now to be in the Hall of Fame at some point this year.
Yep.
This match, though, kind of talk about this match between Psycho Sid and The Undertaker.
Well, I won't talk about this match specifically as in WrestleMania 13, but this matchup happened about a month later in Huntington, West Virginia on Monday Night Raw for the WWF title, and I was in attendance. So getting to see this rematch. So this was Sid's last match in the WWF, supposedly.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think something happened to where the Undertaker's next opponent got hurt or something. And they literally called Sid back and said they needed him to come back and wrestle Taker at this specific Monday Night Raw that I was at in Huntington, West Virginia. And that was his last match. So, really cool experience having that. But no, these two big guys, like Sid can go with the right opponents.
Yeah.
Obviously, he works better with guys like Bret and Shawn, but he could go with Diesel and with The Undertaker, stuff like that. So I think this moment was huge because The Undertaker won the WWF Championship at Survivor Series 1991, literally 1 year after he debuted against Hulk Hogan. And a lot of people don't know that because he won it at Survivor Series and he dropped it back to Hogan 10 days later on a TV special. So nobody remembers that really as his first title win.
Right.
Everybody thinks that his first title win was here at this WrestleMania.
Right.
Which, when you look at it from perspective, okay, he beat Hogan, great. But this should have been his first. It felt like his first title win. And like you said, his first really big WrestleMania moment. He even, at the time, he was doing he had transitioned to the all black, was doing the teardrop, doing more of the darker Undertaker. For this match, he brought back the gray gloves and the gray bootstraps and those kind of things. So that was really, really cool. I remember watching this match live. Really cool moment for sure.
Yep. And then we move on to WrestleMania 14 against Kane, the first big Undertaker versus Kane kind of match at WrestleMania. I believe they also, they run it back a couple years later, which, I mean, anytime you do Kane and Undertaker kind of in their prime, it's never going to not be interesting or something you don't want to watch. It's something that you definitely want to watch for.
Well, and then if those that are listening aren't familiar with the story of that one, they run it back later, but like the story leading up to this first encounter with Kane, the Undertaker saying, "I'll never fight my brother. I'll never yada yada yada," all this kind of stuff. Like, this is huge right here. This is humongous.
Yeah.
And it's not just saying humongous because you got two humongous guys in the ring, but this was huge for their first encounter for sure.
Yep, I completely agree. We'll talk about Kane again here in a little bit. Let's move on to a Big Boss Man, because this one was not the winner was a controversial fashion, but the ending of it was very controversial, I guess is a good way to put it. Because this match took place inside Hell in a Cell.
Yes.
I mean, everybody kind of looks over Big Boss Man in the ring, but Big Boss Man could go. During this time period, he could hold his own. But everybody remembers the closing shot of, I believe it was the Brood, that helped. So Gangrel, Christian, and Edge helped Undertaker hang Big Boss Man inside Hell in a Cell. Looking back at it, I think Undertaker has killed like 15 guys in WWE canon at this point.
And he's the greatest of all time, yes.
Yeah, and he's not in prison or in jail because
not at
wrestling. But this definitely, I think, was looking back on it, one of the most controversial finishes. But at the time, how was it perceived? Like, because I don't really know. I haven't really heard how it was perceived during that time. If it's perceived the same way it is now, or looked at differently because of the time period.
Taker was hurt at the time, if I'm not mistaken. He was hurt going into this match, and Boss Man could go, but Boss Man was definitely at the tail end of his career. Yep. So I think, if I remember from Bruce Pritchard's podcast correctly, it was a chore to kind of get through this whole angle and to kind of get through this. And then the angle actually happens, and then it's a chore to still get through because something's not right with the noose or something, and it looks horrible. Yeah. And then Edge and Christian and Gangrel, their suspension stuff is not working right, so they're just dangling there, and it was just a train wreck. So I think it was one of those things where they were just glad to just get it done and move on.
Yep. I can definitely get that sense. Then we move on to WrestleMania X7, WrestleMania 17. So he was not on WrestleMania 16.
Correct. He was out with injury, and that was when he was transitioning to the Biker Taker character.
Yep. But we have our first Triple H versus Undertaker WrestleMania match, which a lot of people overlook this WrestleMania match against Triple H. Going back and watching all these matches, man, this match is really good.
So good.
I don't think it holds up to their other two because the other two are, in my opinion, kind of on a league of their own. But this match, I think, looking back at all of it, this was the first really good Undertaker WrestleMania match.
Yes. Yes. First quality.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. They went all over the place. He chokeslammed Triple H off of scaffolding. And a lot of people credit this WrestleMania as the greatest WrestleMania of all time. I
Yep.
disagree, but that's not what this podcast is about. I say all that to say one of the reasons that they say that is not just for the Rock and Austin match with the epic video package.
Yeah.
This match has a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
This was a big spot on the card. This was one of Triple H's last major spots before he gets injured, and then he makes his comeback. And like you said, this is the Undertaker and his quality wrestling coming through at a time where they needed it, because 6 days before this is when WCW got purchased.
Yeah.
So this was Undertaker and Triple H really kind of marking their territory and putting on a great show.
Yep. And then we move on to WrestleMania 16, which, going back and watching this match, is a car crash of a match in a great way between the Undertaker and Ric Flair. I'm just putting this out there now. Ric Flair is the greatest bleeder of all time. Like, the dude just, you look at him wrong and he starts bleeding. But this match was really good. I love these kind of Undertaker matches as well, the no disqualification matches and the stipulation matches, because it seems like, especially at WrestleMania, it seems like when you put him in this scenario, other than maybe WrestleMania 32, it works really well. And even WrestleMania 32 had the chain jumping off the top of the cell.
Sure.
But it seems like there is just something different about Undertaker when you put him inside Hell in a Cell or Steel Cage or no disqualification or anything like that.
Well, and I think the no DQ stipulation at the time was to try to, quote, cover up Ric Flair and what he was going through at the time. Ric Flair was going through a lot personally here around WrestleMania 18, 2002. He was not excited about getting back in the ring. He didn't want to get back in the ring. He was brought back to the company as just an authority figure, on-screen character. That was in November. By January, he's wrestling Vince McMahon at Royal Rumble in a street fight.
Yeah.
So, apparently, word is that the Undertaker specifically requested Ric Flair for this match. Like, he wanted to face Flair. Flair didn't want to do it, but Taker talked him into it, and the rest is history. I think that just goes to show you the respect that the Undertaker has for the wrestling business, for those who came before him and wanting to make Flair look good, help bring his confidence up on such a big stage.
Yeah, I completely agree. We're not going to talk about all these other ones kind of in between, because you have WrestleMania 19 against A-Train and Big Show. We kind of already talked about that match as well. Then we have WrestleMania 20 once again against Kane inside Madison Square Garden. That match was another really strong match between the two guys. And then we come to WrestleMania 21. WrestleMania 21 to me is a really interesting WrestleMania, because I believe that's also the same WrestleMania where Edge and Mick Foley had their street fight. Is that at WrestleMania?
That one was 20. No, that one was 22. 21 was the debut of the Money in the Bank match. 21 was Batista beating Triple H and John Cena beating JBL.
But 21 still is 20, like the 21, 22, really 23. All three of those are really interesting WrestleManias to me.
Yes, they are.
And this match is kind of part of it, because it's the first instance where we kind of look at and say, okay, if Taker was going to lose at WrestleMania, because hindsight is always 2020. Personally, if I was able to book WrestleMania Undertaker streak, I would probably never have him lose at WrestleMania, because he's the Undertaker and he deserves that aspect of it. But if anybody was going to beat the Undertaker out of all the people he faced, I think there are 3 people on the list, and Randy Orton was one of them. At WrestleMania 21, 2005, the match itself, one of the greatest RKOs ever in this match as well, with the choke slam into the RKO. Really great false finish there as well, of like, you believe for a second that he was not going to kick out. This match itself, it's probably up to this point the best Undertaker WrestleMania match between the two guys, and it's still one of those that you can go back and watch and see how great it actually is.
And this is context for this. This is coming off Randy Orton being the youngest ever world heavyweight champion.
Yeah.
So Randy Orton beats Chris Benoit. And I know we can't talk about that, but Randy Orton beats Chris Benoit at SummerSlam 2004 for the championship. The next night, he gets kicked out of Evolution.
Yep.
The next month, he drops the title back to Triple H. So then what's Randy Orton to do? He's out of Evolution. He's supposed to be a babyface. It's not working. And all of this is directly from Randy Orton's mouth. So you can go check out the Broken Skull Sessions interview with Randy Orton. Fantastic interview, by the way, but this part specifically really got me. What's he to do? The legend killer character comes up and he starts doing that. And who's the biggest legend to go after other than the Undertaker? You know? So obviously we know where Randy Orton got to in his career. He's one of the greatest of all time. Obviously he didn't need to beat the Undertaker. The streak wasn't as big as it was later on. But I do think Randy Orton, could you imagine in 2005 the heel he could have been if he'd have beaten the Undertaker?
Yeah.
So I think this was fantastic. Randy Orton was going through a lot of personal issues during this time. He actually missed rehearsal for this match. Yeah. So he and Taker were not on good terms. But the match, you would have never known it, didn't suffer for it. I thought it was great. This is one that I wish they would have run back later on. Yeah. I wish we would have gotten another WrestleMania match with Orton and Taker. Yeah. Because later on, like 10 more years, when Orton was, at his prime, man, could have been so good.
Yep, I completely agree. And then we kind of move into a weird phase. This next one's a really weird phase, I believe, of the Undertaker WrestleMania match, because we have WrestleMania 22 against Mark Henry in a casket match.
Which, by the way, I got to stand up next to the casket they used for Mark Henry at Access in New Orleans. Oh my god!
It's probably huge.
Massive casket.
Oh my gosh! But this one, I mean, it's not one of his better WrestleMania matches, but it's not bad. Like, it's not a chore to watch. It's still a lot of fun. It's a casket match. It's a gimmick match. This was, I believe, they were trying to give Mark Henry this big push during this time and seeing what he could do. And it kind of went nowhere after this WrestleMania match with The Undertaker. But, it was still, going back and watching it, it doesn't hold up, but it's still not terrible. But then we move into WrestleMania 23. And 23 through, you could say 30, but I'm going to, for this purpose, 23 through 29.
Yes,
is a streak of Undertaker matches that you can't, like, this is where the streak really started to take off. And this is where the streak became the biggest thing on WrestleMania.
Yeah, and it became the thing, like, each guy, and you'll see as we go through this, each guy that they stack up against the Undertaker after this, you think they could be the one to do it.
Yeah.
They could be the one to break the streak. So not only does a streak become a thing, the quality of opponents becomes a thing. Therefore, like you said, a must-watch moment in each year's WrestleMania.
And it becomes, in a lot of ways, it becomes bigger than the title, bigger than the main event. Like, to get the Undertaker match, because you hear Edge talk about it like when he was talking about that match, it's being in the ring with the Undertaker at WrestleMania is better than anything else, and like bigger than anything else during this time period. But we have WrestleMania 23 against Batista. Amazing match. Batista. This is really where Batista is starting to come into his own. Yep. He is really starting to take off in WrestleMania 23. WrestleMania 24 against Edge is another one where Edge was actually slated to win, but he refused to beat the Undertaker at WrestleMania, which shows the respect that Edge had for the Undertaker, but it also shows like the respect that the streak had at this point.
And I think at the time this was streak versus streak, because I think Edge, as far as one-on-one matches, hadn't lost yet.
Yeah, and I think he was like 6-0.
Yeah, 6 or 8 or something like that.
Something like that at that point. To Taker's 17 or 15-0, becoming 16-0 after this WrestleMania. This match itself was amazing. Best part of the match isn't even necessarily the match itself. It's Charles Robinson running down the ramp and sliding in. The amazing slide in, amazing count, and then choke slam right after. All of that was absolutely great. Yep. And then we come to the 4, in my opinion,
the holy grail of WrestleMania matches.
The 4 greatest WrestleMania matches of all time. In my humble opinion, because these matches with Shawn and these matches with Triple H are just, if you want to see what WrestleMania is all about, it's these 4 matches. Like these 4 matches, and these 4 guys. Let's be honest, these 3 guys, they don't need the accolation because they are already, at this point, Shawn Michaels is already the greatest of all time. The Undertaker at this point is already the greatest character of all time, and Triple H is the greatest heel of all time at this, during the, like, before this, but he was still, considered that. And they showed why they're on a league of their own in these 4 matches. WrestleMania 25, Shawn Michaels is amazing. It's I think everybody knew going into it this match was going to be good. I don't think we expected it to be what it was.
Right.
Because it's Shawn Michaels and it's The Undertaker. Yes, we know that they can have great matches, but what we got was storytelling at its best. And I love the fact because these 4 matches are literally one giant story over a span of 4 years.
That didn't start out that way.
No, it did not.
No. Because let me just say, number one, my opinion, the first match against Shawn Michaels at 25 is the greatest, not just WrestleMania match. It is the greatest wrestling match of all time.
Yeah.
Period. Case closed. No further debate, in my opinion. Having said that, 26 is pretty close. 27 against Triple H, really, really good. Honestly, if I'm ranking them 1, 2, 3, 4, 27 is probably number 4. But if you go back and you watch that match, that's awesome. Your number 4, come on, man. Yeah. So the 26 match with Shawn wasn't supposed to happen because I think they had something else planned for The Undertaker or something. I don't know. And I remember I read in Shawn Michaels' book. This is how it all happened. Shawn, after WrestleMania 25, took some time off because he truly thought, man, that was a perfect match. I should have just retired on that one. I should have just retired on that one. And then when they got him to come back, it was okay, this next one is going to be my last one, and I want to run it back. So in coming back, part of the negotiations was I want Taker at Mania, and Vince and creative was kind of wishy-washy on it or whatever. Well, they had the Slammy Awards at the end of 2009. I don't think it was 2010 just yet. In 2009. And Taker wasn't around because he was taking that whole year off.
Yep.
Shawn is supposed to go out to accept the award for Match of the Year in 2009 for the Mania match. Okay. So Shawn is talking all day hey, I'm supposed to cut a promo when I win this award, and I want to challenge Taker to the match at Mania. Are we going to do it? Vince was I don't know if we're going to do it or not. Shawn was I'm going to put my career on the line. I don't know if I want to do it, blah, blah, blah. So they're dragging their feet. Up until right before Shawn goes out, the decision was not made. And Shawn says, look, this is a promo I'm going to cut. We're going to run with this or not? And right there is where they decided to do it. And he literally 2 minutes later walked out on stage and cut the promo and challenged The Undertaker.
Crazy.
I know.
Crazy. But yeah, it's 25 and 26. To me, I think 25 is the best match of all time. Well, 28 is just, to me, 28 though is the best story of
Well, I don't think 28 is as important if Shawn's not involved. Another Taker Triple H match would have been great. Put him inside Hell in a Cell. Okay, great. Throw Shawn in the mix. Now we're talking.
Yeah,
you know,
and the spot that everybody remembers, the greatest false finish in the streak history, is the super kick into the pedigree.
Yep.
And then Taker doesn't kick out until literally 2.99999. How they planned that was perfect. And even to this day, when I go back and watch it, I still think he's not kicking out every single time. And I'm I know he wins, but it's there's just this thing of oh my gosh, that was so close. I agree. I think 25, the match itself was great. You obviously have the spot with Taker diving to the outside and the cameraman did not catch him and then got fired immediately after, which good. Because that could have ended Taker's career right then and there. 26 though, I love 26 too because it's the storytelling of it and the build up to it is so great with the Elimination Chamber or with the Rumble, starting with the Rumble of Shawn has to win this to get to WrestleMania. Batista eliminates him. That whole debacle kind of breaks up DX in the middle of it because of Shawn's outrage of not getting to face Taker. Elimination Chamber, he cost Undertaker, and then we head into WrestleMania. And the video package before WrestleMania 26 is amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
I remember exactly where I was at when I was watching WrestleMania 26. I knew it was it. I knew it was the end of Shawn's career.
Yeah.
And I cried because I knew it. I knew it was going to happen. But what an incredible back-to-back matches. It's interesting because everybody talks about how great 26 is. And it just doesn't hold up to 25. Well, compared to Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon ladder matches, 1994 WrestleMania 10, arguably the greatest ladder match in wrestling history. And then you follow up, fast forward to 1995 at SummerSlam, they have another ladder match for the Intercontinental title, and it's just as good. But nobody talks about that one as much as the WrestleMania 10 match, but it was just as good. It's the same thing here with Shawn and with Taker with 25 and 26. 25 is the greatest wrestling match of all time. 26 in some respects was just as good, but 25 happened first.
And I think part of it is what made it so good in 26 is obviously you had the streak versus career aspect of it. And that whole playing into that part was really, really a massive factor in all of that. And then we come to 27. And this is where we start to see, I think after 25 is where we start to see the new Undertaker wrestling schedule of he wrestles at WrestleMania, doesn't show up again until Mania season, which I loved it. Like, I think because it's not like the same thing of like bringing a part-timer back to have this. It's like the streak is WrestleMania during this time.
Correct.
Because to be honest, during this time period, especially after 2010, WrestleManias were not that good, if I'm going to be completely honest.
Sure.
26, the only good thing about that was Shawn and Taker. Like, that was the only good match that I can remember on that. You have The Rock being the special guest, and you have him coming out.
That was at 27.
That was at 27. So 27 is the one I'm thinking of. 27 was not that
27
great
was not good, no.
of a WrestleMania.
I mean, Randy Orton and CM Punk had a really good match that not a lot of people talk about. Edge and Alberto Del Rio opened the show.
Which gets remembered because it's Edge to that point.
Edge's
last match. 28 though. 28 was 27's remembered for those moments and The Rock at the end. 28 is obviously remembered for the Triple H match and then Rock Cena. And then we'll get to 29 in a little bit as well. But it's kind of these 3-year periods. I feel like WrestleMania, the best thing on WrestleMania was the Undertaker match. Because of 27, you had Undertaker Triple H, which is a really great match in itself. 28, you have the Hell in a Cell match, which is my personal favorite match of all time. Just because of the weight around it. I really wish, going back and looking at it, really wish this was Taker's and Triple H's final match, if we could have it that way, because it's a perfect end to. They called it the end of a generation, or end of an era. And it was the end of an era between Shawn, between Triple H, and between Undertaker. And I think that would have been the perfect place to end that. But then we come to 29, and WrestleMania 29. I understand. I'm the indie guy. I'm the young buck. I'm the biggest CM Punk mark on the podcast, and I'm fine with that. WrestleMania 29, though, man, that match with Punk is so good too. So good. It's so good, but the thing that makes it so good is the build-up. Like, the build-up to this match, you have the unfortunate passing of Paul Bearer during this time. And I still remember the segment. Undertaker is out there, celebrating, or not celebrating, but doing the on his knee with the tongue out with the urn, and I think they had a hologram of Paul Bearer.
Yeah, it's something. I don't remember exactly, but
something like that. And then Punk comes out and says, "I'm sorry for your loss," and stops, and then says, "At WrestleMania." And like from that moment on, it's like it's on, and he dumps the ashes out on Taker. He cuts the promo. Paul Heyman dresses as Paul Bearer at one point. Like the
Oh, I
build to
forgot
this
about
match,
him dressing like
yeah,
Paul Bearer. That's amazing.
the build to this match is what made this match so good. Not saying the match itself wasn't good, because it's Punk hitting the elbow drop through the table from the top rope is amazing.
Yes.
But this match itself was so good, absolutely good.
You
Part of
know,
me, this is part of my Starrcade '97. Part of me wishes this match never happened, because I believe Punk should have been in the main event later that night. But if you're not going to be in the main event, facing the Undertaker at WrestleMania is just as good. And I think
I
that's
was
part of it.
just getting ready to bring that up before you said that. Like, I know you've talked a lot about Punk and being in that match with Rock and Cena and all that kind of stuff. Okay, great, that's fine. But like, we are spending a whole episode talking
Yeah,
about the Undertaker at WrestleMania, and if you can be on that list at all
yeah,
and have one of the better matches of those, because I would look at this list of matches and I would say Punk, you could make the argument that he's in the top 5 of the Undertaker
yeah,
WrestleMania matches, behind the 2 Shawn and 2 Triple H matches. I mean, I think it's close with Edge
yeah.
at
That's what I
24,
was going to say.
but like, man, in the ring with the Undertaker, like, you could argue that you knew Rock and Cena were going to come up and be in the main event again. You knew
Yeah,
that was going to happen. But you just laid out the whole story of Punk and Taker and Paul Bearer and
yeah,
Paul Heyman and all that stuff. Like, that means just as much.
yeah.
So having Punk be in that match with a guy that I'm sure that he respects in the Undertaker, like, come on, it don't get much better than that for your last WrestleMania.
No, it doesn't. And I completely agree. I think Punk's match is top 5 with. It depends on which match I watch last, between Edge
Yes.
and Taker and Punk and Taker, because they're
Yes.
both so good for different reasons. And Punk is the third guy. Like Orton probably could have won, and it would have been amazing. Edge could have won, and it would have elevated him even more. Punk could have won, and because he was already like one of the biggest heels in WWE at that time.
Yep.
If Punk would have won at WrestleMania against Taker, could you imagine the heat even more, especially the buildup that they had? Like
Yep.
he would have been next level heel in WWE.
Agreed.
But it was this string of matches with the Undertaker was amazing.
Yes. This string of matches sets him up to be one of, if not the greatest of all time.
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
like, you can make the argument that for every single WrestleMania, not only did it create the Undertaker moment, not only did it create the streak that is the Undertaker's WrestleMania streak, but from Batista to CM Punk, those were probably the best match on all those WrestleManias.
Yeah.
Like, you can go up and down the card. It would be tough to find a match on any of those manias that are better than the Undertaker's match 23 to 29.
And what's really interesting, between all 21 of these matches, is only 2 of them were for the world title.
Yeah.
You had the one against Psycho Sid, and then you had the one against Edge. Like
Batista.
was Batista for the title?
Yep.
So
Taker beat
3.
Batista for the title. Yep.
Yeah, so 3 of them were for the title. But 3 matches out of 21 is, especially for a guy like the Undertaker, shows how important
Yes.
the streak itself is during this time period as well. So the streak is now the thing at WrestleMania. Until we get to WrestleMania 30, and I will argue that the streak, the Undertaker match, it was a big deal, but I think it was second fiddle to Daniel Bryan's rise to the top.
And I think the reason for that is because everybody expected Undertaker to win.
Yeah. And I think
that's
because
why.
we all thought in our mind, which I still think in my mind, that Brock Lesnar does not need the win against Taker, doesn't need to be the one to beat the streak. If Triple H can beat Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania, the Undertaker can beat Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania, and Lesnar's fine, all of that stuff. And I remember right after this match happened that there was a lot of reports and ideas that the finish that happened was not supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Now looking back at it, listening to everybody, this was the definitive finish. This is how it was supposed to go. And we have Brock Lesnar versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania 30, and Brock Lesnar pins The Undertaker after hitting 3 F5s. And while the decision is questionable, the moment is massive. Like the moment is undeniable.
Yep.
Of you get one of the greatest fan reactions of all time with that dude sitting in the front row. You have the silence after the win, and I love that fact of not playing the music. I know we talked about before. Justin Roberts thought there was a mistake, so he was not going to be the one to announce Taker's first loss.
Yep.
And just the silence of shock, and all you hear is Paul Heyman just screaming, "You did it! You did it! You did!" Like all of that. While the match itself, in my opinion, should not have ended that way, the moment is undeniable.
It is. It's one of the greatest moments in WrestleMania history. Like you knew the moment that streak was going to end, no matter who it was against. Like that was going to be one of the biggest moments of WrestleMania history.
Yeah,
I'm with you. I'll argue that Brock Lesnar doesn't need it, but in Brock Lesnar, I mean, that pushed him into superstardom.
yep.
He was already a star, but that pushed him into a different stratosphere that we still see today.
Yeah.
I
I believe it was the SummerSlam after, right? It was the SummerSlam after. Yeah, that he like destroyed Cena. Or was it that was SummerSlam 2014?
That was right after this.
Yeah, he is when he goes out and just squashes Cena in the main event at SummerSlam.
Correct.
Yeah,
and then SummerSlam 2015 is him and Taker.
Which that Taker feud, feud from he returns at Battleground against Cena and when Seth Rollins and Lesnar are in the main event. He returns. Then we have a match at SummerSlam.
Hell in a Cell.
Hell in a Cell. One before
SummerSlam. One like Payback or something like that.
Payback. SummerSlam. Hell in a Cell. And then we go back into the second Bray Wyatt feud. But yeah, it builds them up to make that run.
Yeah, it does. But for this match in particular, I've only watched this match one time. I can't bring myself to watch it because it just, I'm like you. I don't think the streak ever should have ended. I can't accept that it ended. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about it, it drives my hatred of Brock Lesnar up even more. But I also know that it wasn't, I want to say it wasn't Brock's call.
Yeah.
Because ultimately Vince makes the decision, but Vince probably had some influence. If he saw the writing on the wall of where he wanted to go with Brock after this, I can see Vince saying, yeah, we're going to end the streak tonight.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't the original finish of the match. That wasn't how it was planned until day of.
Yep.
So even day of, I'm pretty sure they went back and forth. This one's hard. This one's hard to talk about. It's hard to watch. Yeah, man. It's tough.
Yeah, it is tough. And I don't know. I think because you hear how when you see backstage videos and stuff of Brock's relationship with Taker.
Yes.
And obviously, I don't think there's anybody more in the business that Brock respects more.
Nobody.
Than The Undertaker. Right. And I think it goes the other way around too. Like I think The Undertaker respects. If he didn't respect Brock Lesnar, he wouldn't have agreed to have not just that match, but the feud that they had afterwards as well. Yeah, I agree. I've watched it a couple times just to see. Obviously, this is the first time that we see, which is weird to say, but this is the first time where we see the age of The Undertaker taking its toll on him.
Yep.
Obviously, the concussions don't help.
Right.
Then you have him walking back through the curtain and literally collapsing as he walks back through the curtain.
Yep.
And this is where I'm not gonna say the mystique of The Undertaker died because it's not dead. It's still very much alive and well, but it definitely diminished it a lot. Because of the fact that I think we were so used to seeing the character Undertaker. This is the first time that we saw Mark Calloway, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think but that's not necessarily a bad thing as well because, we respect Mark Calloway for what he has done.
Yep.
But yeah, this was where we start to see the WrestleMania matches not mean as much.
Sure. Once the streak's over, I mean, it loses its luster, right?
Yeah.
And then you're on this train of, can he get back on track?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, and because WrestleMania 31, we have the match with Bray Wyatt, which my opinion. I think you could have flip-flopped Brock and Bray, and I think it would have worked out a little better because that elevates Bray and Brock, or Taker, but that's another topic for another day.
Yes, it
You
is.
have that Bray Wyatt match, which is still like really good. My only complaint with it is that you had a Taker match outside in the middle of the day, which is like
strange.
that's come on now. Both are spooky dark characters, and we have a match at like 6:00 in the afternoon, like 6:00 in the evening. It doesn't make sense. Then we have WrestleMania 32 with the weird match against Shane McMahon.
Yep.
That's thrown together. So he gets his 2 wins back. Then we come to WrestleMania 33 against Roman Reigns, which this is during the Roman hate at all-time high, just during this time period. Which losing to or beating the Undertaker did not help the hate. In fact, I think it played into it a whole lot more.
Yes.
But you had the whole segment with him, like after the match is over, Taker loses. It was not the best match ever.
Right.
It wasn't even good in my opinion. It was long, and Taker was struggling throughout it.
You know, I've gone back and watched that. I'm going to differ from your opinion there. I've gone back and watched it, and it's better than I remember. Honestly.
Yeah.
We all remember the messed up tombstone spot. We all get that. And we all remember the couple of moments where Taker was slow and he was a little behind.
Yeah.
We all remember those because they stick out, obviously. But the match wasn't, in my opinion at least, wasn't as bad as I originally had thought. But yes, this was the rise of Roman Reigns. This was, the Boo Birds were out in full force. We saw the Undertaker, go ahead with your point, kind of,
the retirement in a weird way, which if that was the way he was going to go out, then that was a great way to go out, of leaving your hat, leaving your gloves. I wouldn't be shocked if that happens this year again at WrestleMania, of him kind of coming out, leaving the hat and the gloves and the jacket in the ring.
Yep.
And that seemed like that was it.
It was supposed to be.
That was supposed to be it for the Undertaker. He had a match before WrestleMania, correct?
He was in the Rumble.
He was in the Rumble next year?
He was in the Rumble before WrestleMania 33. Oh, you're going to 34.
I'm going to 34.
No.
Correct.
No.
So the next match is WrestleMania 34.
Correct.
When Cena is calling him out, which Taker doesn't show up until WrestleMania.
Correct.
And that was still one of the most hyped up matches, because I think Cena Taker is a match that we wish we would have gotten
sooner
in both guys' prime.
Yep.
Like Cena was probably towards the end of his prime. I'd still say Cena's kind of in his prime now, but he was towards the end of his WWE run in his prime. Obviously, Taker's prime had kind of gone out the window at this point.
Listen.
But the match itself, the build was great.
For those of you, number one, who have not watched The Last Ride with The Undertaker, you need to go watch it, because it's the peek behind the curtain from 33 to 34, especially that one. It's incredible. It's so good. You talked about the mystique of The Undertaker earlier and how we know that it's not gone, but it's doesn't feel as important.
Right. Can
I just tell you, and for all of you who are listening that do not know this, I was in the building for WrestleMania 34.
Yeah.
When those lights went out and that gong hit.
Oh yeah.
It's unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life.
Yeah.
That mystique, the pop, just that feeling in the building when we know the Undertaker is about to come out.
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
One of my favorite in-person wrestling experiences, not just WrestleMania, in-person wrestling experiences ever.
Yeah.
And then Taker goes out there and plays all the hits, squashes Cena. And if you listen to the documentary, he was prepared to go 25 minutes and they went 5.
Yeah.
But wow.
He had, going back and watching that documentary, he had something to prove.
Yes, he did.
At this Mania. I believe this is right after he got his new hip. So he was feeling better. Props to Cena for carrying this feud to Mania.
Yes.
And then taking the squash, because he obviously understands the importance of the Undertaker at WrestleMania,
Yep.
the importance of Undertaker. Yeah, I just not kind of realized this. My first time seeing Undertaker in person was post streak, building up towards WrestleMania 32, and still the gong hits. It's not even at WrestleMania; it's at a Monday Night Raw. The gong hits, and literal goosebumps go up my arm because it's like this is the greatest gimmick of all time. Like this is the greatest thing of all time right here in front of us, which is really really cool. WrestleMania 35 comes and goes. Surprising to kind of all of us. No Undertaker. We kind of thought
he showed up the night after WrestleMania.
Yeah, to choke slam Elias. I remember that.
Yep.
But without a match at WrestleMania, I think we all kind of thought, okay, 34 was it. No more Taker. Went out on a squash match against Cena. Not the best way to go out, but it's better than 33. It's better than WrestleMania 30.
Yep.
You know, that it is what it is.
Yep.
And then, obviously, we're in Saudi Arabia. Like all great things start. We're in Saudi Arabia. Taker comes out and wins the tag team cup or whatever whatever it was by himself. He just comes out, choke slams AJ, pins him 1, 2, 3.
Yep.
Wins. Literally doesn't even take his jacket off. I don't think doesn't even take his hat off.
Nope.
Choke slam 1, 2, 3. Walks by, walks away. They're supposed to get a regular match at WrestleMania 36. Obviously, pandemic happened. You were planning on being in the building, WrestleMania 36, or not in the building, but in the Pirate Stadium for WrestleMania 36. Obviously, kind of bummed that we didn't get the live action match, but the cinematic boneyard match was my second favorite match at WrestleMania 36.
Yep,
it was amazing.
What a way for Taker to go out.
Perfect. In my opinion, it's perfect because yes, it's a cinematic match, but it puts you in the element of the Undertaker.
Yes,
like it puts you in the Undertaker's element of like.
That's right.
Spooky stuff and throwing dudes off the top of the building with the Undertaker symbol behind you on fire and like everything else, and burying him alive and all this other stuff. It was absolutely amazing.
Let me ask you this. If you're fantasy booking that, and let's see that Mania does happen in a stadium in front of people, we get a regular one-on-one match, The Undertaker and AJ Styles. Does Taker lose that match?
I say so. No. I think AJ loses.
Think so?
I still think that's because to me, I know wrestling logic and wrestling history says the guy retiring goes out on his back.
Yep.
And like I understand that, I get that. To me, Taker is the exception to that rule.
Sure.
He already lost the streak. Like I think his last match at WrestleMania needs to be that victory, that win. And I think against AJ, because it's not going to hurt AJ.
No.
And AJ Styles would take him to AJ Styles could have a 4.5-star match with a broom. He could have a 4.5-star match with me in the ring. Like so with somebody with experience,
which
like
is
Taker,
equivalent to a broom.
Exactly. Actually, he may get more out of the broom than out of me. But with somebody like Taker, I think he would have been able to have an amazing match between the two of them and go out on and Taker win and then not hurt AJ Styles at all.
I agree. I definitely agree with that. I would lean either way just because if it would have happened in a stadium, I would have been there in person and I wouldn't have complained if AJ would have beat The Undertaker. But I also wouldn't have complained if Undertaker would have beat AJ. So, that's where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it. That's all the Undertaker matches to this point. There could be another WrestleMania match at some point down the line. You never know with Taker.
Who knows?
Getting inducted this year into the Hall of Fame, which, I'm glad that they're doing it. I really wish it was just him by himself. But if we're getting Vader in the Hall of Fame as well, then I'm happy with that because Vader absolutely deserves it. I just realized, man, like WrestleMania this year, we're going to hear the glass break. We're going to hear the gong hit. And we may even get a If You Smell. Like we're getting a lot of really cool things at WrestleMania this year. That's insane. That's crazy.
We're going to be there.
We're going to be there in person. I'm going to be cheering and screaming as loud as we can. And I know my brother is very jealous because he doesn't watch wrestling as much anymore. But like Stone Cold Steve Austin was like his favorite of all time. And I told him I'm going to WrestleMania and that he's going to be there. And he was like, you better record the glass breaking, and the
And the
crowd
pop.
reaction, because
Yep.
the pop's going to be crazy,
It's gonna be nuts. I can't wait.
especially if he comes out in the trunks with the knee braces on and the
Oh
jacket.
man.
Oh my gosh, I
Oh
love it.
man.
I love it. So much beer. It's going to be
I
crazy.
know. It's gonna be nuts. Like WrestleMania and Texas, perfect place to induct the Undertaker in the Hall of Fame. Perfect
Absolutely,
place for Austin to make some sort of return, whatever that actually looks like.
absolutely,
Um, I mean, it's what WrestleMania is all about, and that's what we're doing with all these extra podcasts and all this kind of stuff. We're celebrating the things that WrestleMania is all about, and we couldn't do that without talking about the Undertaker.
absolutely. To me, the Undertaker is WrestleMania.
I know that Shawn
And
Michaels is nicknamed Mr. WrestleMania,
yeah,
but like
I
Undertaker could fight him for that title.
I think match quality wise, I agree. I think it's Shawn. I
Mhm.
think just the thing as a whole, I really think it's
Longevity.
Undertaker. I
Yes.
really do. I think it's Taker. I don't think WrestleMania would be at where I don't think WrestleMania would be where it's at right now without the Undertaker and without the streak. And I think that's all because of Mark Calloway and Vince McMahon and seeing all of that and playing it together. I think it works out perfectly together.
Well, if you're looking at it, and I'm just going through since we're talking about it here. If you compare Shawn and Taker for that Mr. WrestleMania title, let's look at Taker's streak 23 through, what'd you say, 29? Okay, so Shawn quit at 26.
Correct.
So you got 26, Shawn and Taker, 25, Shawn and Taker, 24, Shawn and Flair, 23, Shawn and Cena, main event for the world title, 22, Shawn and Vince in a street fight. Okay.
It's so fun.
It's fun. 21, Shawn versus Kurt Angle.
Yeah.
20, Shawn, Chris Benoit, and Triple H in a triple threat match. 19, Shawn and Jericho. Okay. 14, because Shawn was out 15 through 18. 14, Shawn and Austin. 13, Shawn was hurt. 12, Shawn and Brett. 11, Shawn and Diesel. 10, Shawn and Razor in a ladder match.
Yeah.
And then again, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5 don't really count for Shawn. 6, 7, he was in 5 and 6, he was in the Rockers. 7, he was in the Rockers too. Sorry. 8 was his first single against Tito Santana, and 9 was against Tatanka. So,
match opponents. I think if you're looking at match opponents, I think it's Shawn, but I don't know, the streak itself, I think adds so much to it.
Yep.
And I honestly would be fine if you put it like Shawn 1A, Taker 1B. Like I think they're on the same. I think they're side by side, right by each other.
100% they are.
Which kind of going through that list, I'm really surprised that we don't have like a Kurt Angle on this list of like WrestleMania matches against Undertaker, or like even like a Bret Hart, like not even getting that match. There's a lot of big names that you could put, which I think if you're looking, I think if
Austin,
The Rock. Like I think if Vince could look at this list and go back in time, I think he would not do a lot of these matches against like Mark Henry or against some of these other guys. I think he would put in an Austin, a Bret, a Rock, Angle, an Eddie Guerrero. Like Eddie Guerrero versus Taker at WrestleMania would be amazing.
Yep.
Not even like a Rey Mysterio. We never even got like a Rey versus Taker, or there's so many other guys that you could put in here as well. But yeah, Taker's streak is never going to be repeated, never going to be matched. It's in its own thing. It's in its own league, and it's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
It really is one of the most prolific, all-time great performers in the wrestling business. Mount Rushmore of wrestling for sure.
Yep, absolutely. All right, anything else you want to add before we put a bow on this week's episode and wrap it up?
No, man. Congrats to The Undertaker for finally taking his rightful place, as we all knew he would, in the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
It's one of those things that you hate to see the guy go. It's time, but, hate to see the guy not make regular appearances. But like we just laid out here, what a career that he had.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think he's going to show up from time to time, not have a match, but show up, tombstone, choke slam, go home, that type of thing. I really expect that. Anytime WrestleMania is in Texas, he's like
For
Stone
sure.
Cold. He'll be there. He's going to be there for it.
For sure.
Well, that's going to do it for this Monday edition of the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast. Once again, we appreciate you tuning in and listening to us each and every week. We are on the road to WrestleMania, and we are cranking out content as much as we can because, while we're on the road to WrestleMania, there's also another company called AEW that's trying to keep their name in the news as well, and they are doing a great job of that as well because they're breaking stuff every 5 seconds, it seems like, and every weekly episode, I'm sorry, from here until WrestleMania may be like 4 hours long because there's so much happening each and every week. But we are so glad that you're going on this journey with us to WrestleMania. But if you're watching us on the BodySlam.net YouTube channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you never miss out on one of our videos, as well as a lot of the other amazing content creators on BodySlam.net. If you're listening to us on SportsWire, we really appreciate Tom and all the guys over there. Make sure you listen to all of their wonderful shows as well, but you can catch us almost every single day on SportsWire as well. And then if you're listening to us on a more traditional platform, we appreciate you listening to us there. Make sure you leave that rate and review, share it with your friends, because everybody knows who The Undertaker is, and everybody loves to talk about Taker because he is the greatest gimmick of all time. And we're seeing that right now with WrestleMania and getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. But yeah, man, we're on the road to WrestleMania, and it seems like we are getting more and more information as we're getting closer and closer to the Showcase of the Immortals.
It's going to be awesome. Can't wait. Thanks to everybody for being on this ride with us. We appreciate your feedback at PBW Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know what you want us to do better. And make sure you follow us on those social media channels for all kinds of crazy extra content that we're going to bring you live from Dallas as we're on the road to WrestleMania.
Yeah. Well, for Chris, I'm Andy York. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to us. And we'll catch you guys down the road.